Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Take Your Points. I'm your host, Ronan Scott. In this week's show, we're talking about the All-Ireland semi-final and Dublin's shock loss to Mayo. And we're also going to talk about Tyrone's All-Ireland semi-final being pushed back to allow for the COVID situation that's happened in the county. Our guests are John McCloskey, the former Armagh coach and also Wasps skills coach, and Connor McAliskey, the former Tyrone player. And we're going to look at the All-Ireland final and Tyrone. So John, thanks for coming on the show. I wanted to get you on to talk about the Dublin-Mayo match. It was an incredible result with Mayo finally ending Dublin's reign. But just to start, you've got a long history with the J. I wonder, could you give us a wee bit of an outline of where you're coming from and your history with Armagh and the teams that you've coached? Right.
Well, originally it was a guy playing for Armagh called Collie Hanratty asked me to come and meet the two Brians, and I had a chat with them and I got involved in the training side. That led me to working with Queen's when we won the Sigerson in 2000, and Crossmaglen with the All-Ireland club with Big Joe. Then after that, Joe got the job with Armagh, and I joined him and Paul on the management team looking after Armagh, and that 4 or 5 Ulster Championships and a couple of All-Irelands, and it was a fantastic experience. Then coached Derry for a year to the National League, and then after that a bit of a break, and then I was asked if I'd be interested in becoming skills coach at Wasps for a season in the Premiership, and I enjoyed that challenge as well. So the last thing I did was the international rules with Joe and Porrick Joyce and Dermot and Dara O'Shea.
Your experience has been about fitness and coaching, and so you've seen the journey that GA's went through in terms of its fitness coaching.
Yeah.
How did you see that shown in the weekend's All-Ireland semi-final there between Dublin and Mayo? Where did you see the evidence of that sort of fitness level?
Oh, for certainly, yeah, because I mean, my role kind of evolved along. Originally it was fitness, and then you can't have fitness without the skills, and so I got really involved in the whole skills of the game and researched it and worked on it, and so they worked hand in hand, and so my role became more pitch related, and then we had someone else do the S&C. But certainly the fitness levels and the skill levels they've kept evolving, and the way the game plan has evolved as well this last 5, 6, 10 years. There's an awful lot of running involved, and in order to carry out that plan effectively, you have to be able to get from one end of the pitch to the other. So those middle third guys, half backs, middle feed and half forwards do a tremendous amount of work, and you need to build that engine, and it doesn't just happen over one season. It takes quite a lot of time.
Mm-hmm. What did you think about the game itself? Like, what was most impressed you about the Mayo performance?
The most important thing was they didn't give up. Whatever the change in tactics, obviously the influence from the manager at half time, they were standing off, they were dropping back into defence. Dublin were playing the ball around, so they didn't have the ball, Dublin did, and they weren't pressing Dublin, they weren't under any pressure. So if they continued that in the second half, then it was only going to be one result. So they upped the ante, put the pressure on the upper end of the pitch, tackled the numbers, won the ball, started forcing a lot of turnovers. The amount of turnovers changed. I think it was the last quarter was something, 10 or 15 turnovers or something. And then they got the scores as well. Okay, turning the ball over, but they actually started to score. And in that first period of extra time, they really went to town on Dublin. And I think one of the most remarkable things was a team of their calibre, Dublin, the way they kind of collapsed and lost their discipline. So that was a bit of a shock, but for Mayo, it's something that's been coming. And the most remarkable thing about them is the stages they are in their journeys. Dublin really more or less coming to the end of their journey for that squad of players. And, they're a fantastic team, what they've achieved. But human nature being what it is, they're bound to be getting tired, they're losing motivation. This is a younger Mayo team, and a relatively new squad. 4 or 5 of the guys like Keegan and Durkin and O'Shea left over from the team that we probably knew, but these new guys come in, have replaced them, and they've kicked on.
You've had experiences of teams who have been successful and then not been successful. What do you think the lessons will be learned there? What lessons should teams learn in that sort of situation?
Well, I think really, the thing is, it doesn't go on forever. You have to maximise when you have an opportunity for a squad of players, and ultimately that's what it's about. It's those guys on the pitch. Everything else is just a periphery. The management does have an influence, and the backroom staff, But if you haven't got the quality on the field, then nothing's going to happen. I think over 4 or 5 years, teams get successful. But you remember, it's an amateur game. They have their private lives, they have their social life, their college life, their work life. All those things have been put on hold. And eventually that starts to tell. And you can't be as motivated 5 or 6 years down the line as you were in the first couple of years. So that's only human nature. Then players start to leave, retire, get injured, and you have to replace those players with leg. And that doesn't always happen. You have some good minors, some good under-20s coming through, but they aren't necessarily as good as what's gone out. And no matter how much you think you've got depth in the bench, it doesn't sometimes always work out that way. And I think in Dublin's case, quality players left for reasons like Jack McCaffrey, has good reason. He's got a medical career, Paul Mannion, and then other players have retired. So you just can't keep replacing players that quality all the time. And Dublin have got to the end of their lifespan, this particular squad. But I'm sure they'll be back again very soon. Yeah,
the first half of the game, it didn't look like they were going to lose. They were so far ahead, and Mayo were missing chances.
Yeah.
O'Shea was sort of marked out of it.
Yeah.
But yet in the second half it was a different game almost, and the next time it was different.
Yeah, it was. And even the pundits at half time, everyone had more or less written them off, and you're expecting the same old story. But the manager pulled a great. He took a big risk. He took off Aidan O'Shea. He'd be a bit of a talisman, but he wasn't having a good game, and so it was a double-edged sword. If it worked, then he was the greatest manager this season anyway, and if it didn't work, he was going to be pilloried. But it did work, and the guys who came in did really well. A couple of them scored, and Mayo just kicked on. They seemed to find belief, and when you get that momentum starts and that energy started, you can get it from the crowd. You can nearly feel the other 31 counties pushing Mayo on. Something not quite tangible, but it's there. You can feel it. And I know I've been in a position where I remember we were playing for Man in a quarter-final in 04, and things started to go wrong, and you just feel this whole wave of energy getting pushed behind the other team, and there's nothing you can do really to stop it. So Mayo, as I say, they had the hunger, they had the youth, some good tactical awareness, and they were accurate on their scores and aggressive in their tackling, so they got the result.
What do you think Mayo can do to win the All-Ireland, whoever they play, whoever they come up against? Do you think that there's a danger they may feel like they've already won it, or that the other team on the other side will feeling like, they've got rid of Dublin?
Well, there is that danger, of course, of the emotional thing of beating Dublin, and I think this gap has probably been a good thing for Mayo, because they come in off that. Well, they beat them, but at the same time, if it had been a fortnight later, you're wondering, well, would that euphoria carry on, or is it better to have a longer gap, this 3 or 4 weeks as it is now, calm things down, regenerate, and get the players recovered, and set the game plan up for Tyrone or Kerry. Kerry are probably most people's favourites, because they're more or less seen as Dublin from 6 years ago. That there's a team coming off 4 or 5 minor titles, abundance of quality throughout the team and the bench, and if anything, I think Kerry were people's favourites at the start of the year, particularly after Dublin's first few performances. So Mayo, I don't think they'll be favourites, and I think they'll have all to do to beat Kerry.
Yeah. I wonder how much you think that the simpler knockout championship structure has helped Mayo, or has it helped the current entertainment value in the championship?
Well, when it's cliff edge like that, and I should say, Kerry or Tyrone. No disrespect to Tyrone, who've got a good chance, but they've had the post, I would say, a little bit of bad luck. But yeah, I personally, it's quite an emotive topic, the whole championship thing. People have been talking about it for the last few years, about how unbalanced it is, and why would you create a competition that has 6 teams in this group and 9 teams in an Ulster group, and then thrashings that have gone on, and teams getting absolutely hammered, couldn't be doing anything for their self-esteem. And to me, the answer is pretty obvious. It's base the championship on the National League. The Division 1, Division 2 teams should be competing for the SAM, And then the second tier competition should be involve teams from Division 3 and Division 4. And there should be clear pathway for those teams from Division 3 and Division 4 up into Division 2, Division 1, and then seedings there as well, and work your championship off that. Now, you could go you play your Division 1, Division 2 teams together, 16 teams, 8-4-2 eventual winner, which is a very short championship after they played the league, or you could break that up into a group system to have more games. But I definitely think that the Tier 2 competition should be played the same day at the same venue as a Sam Maguire. So if you had a Kerry v Dublin, for instance, then the first match would be a Wicklow v I guess Leitrim or somebody like that, whoever's involved. So you get equal amount of promotion, you play at the big venue, you play with a big crowd, you have your all-stars at the end of the year. Those all-stars go on the same trip as the SAM Tier 1 all-stars. And so you're seen to being as an equal. You got a pathway up into the top competition. And I think that would make for a more meaningful competition. The games would be much more closely balanced and much more competitive.
Do you think that the hurling championship, the way they have the tiers in the hurling, that is a good example of those? It
is, because the hurling championship, you have any one of 5 or 6 teams could win it. Maybe not so much with Limerick being so dominant at the minute. My one worry about it is that the Christy Ring and Nicky Record, those teams don't get any kind of a recognition. Nobody really can remember who won Nicky Record last year or the Christy Ring, and so, or the Joe McDonagh. So, maybe that's something they need to work on and put on those matches at the same time as the Liam McCarthy matches, because if it's played on a Saturday at 5 o'clock in some venue somewhere, it doesn't really show it the same respect that they deserve, because those guys are putting in, they're giving a great commitment, they're working really hard, they make the same sacrifices as everybody else. So I believe that they should be given the same respect in terms of promotion, venue, and their chances of winning something.
Okay, and do you think that would bring on the standard, or do you think the standard would improve? Or sometimes I think that perhaps we should be looking at strengthening the clubs in order for counties to get better.
Well, I mean, it's quite a complicated thing. You start right down at juvenile level and work your way up, and we all talk about the standard of play of their own players, but you have to think about the standard of coaches as well. And is the coaching good enough? So they work hand in hand. So there's as much emphasis on getting quality coaches and working on their career development as well as it is the players, and giving everyone an opportunity. But certainly, yeah, I mean, teams that have, and I'm not, like, I enjoy hurling, but I'm not involved in hurling, but it is noticeable the way teams come out of those secondary competitions and don't last very long in the top division. I mean, case in point, Antrim this year, they've retained their Division 1 status, but they didn't really have a great championship. Mm-hmm. So is there some way of helping them to stay there, be exposed to those top games for another season, to try and bring them on? Or is it straight up, straight down,
Yeah. The other big issue at the weekend was Tyrone's extension to their time in the All-Ireland Championship. They said they were going to concede the game because they didn't think they could field because of the COVID issues within the panel. But the GAA have sort of said, we'll give you another week. Do you think that was the right decision to do that? Do you think it was fair, or what was your take on the whole, I suppose, saga you might be able to call it?
We are where we are. We're not privy to all the conversations that have gone on. The GAA headquarters, they take a lot of stick, but it's a difficult job. Their job to try and run competitions within all the protocols there are at the minute. They have the club competitions, everybody biting. So the county season is meant to be a set time period. We need the club competitions to go ahead. There's a whole plethora of different arguments going on there, but definitely I think that Tyrone should have been given space. I think it's only fair for the integrity of the competition, for the amount of effort and time and commitment that those lads put in, and they get caught with the COVID. We hope they recover fully, and you need to give them time to recover after that in order to get ready to play the game. I think Kerry have been very generous as well. But of course then there are all the other side of the argument that say, well, so what happens if Kerry, and when they're waiting, suddenly have an outbreak in Tralee or Killarney, and all of a sudden they need to isolate? So it's a very, very complicated thing, but I definitely think the right thing to do was to give Tyrone the opportunity to play.
The other issue is, how is it going to affect them? I know of stories in club teams where players have got COVID and they're still dealing with the after effects of it, you know,
Yeah.
because it affects your system and your breathing and things like that.
Yes, yeah. I mean, as a whole, I mean, obviously Tyrone have gone for the top medical opinion. I mean, Fergal himself has got 2 doctors in the family. They've been advising him, I'm sure, and I'd expect they've got the best medical advice possible. So if a guy or a number of their players they feel aren't fit enough, they're not going to put them under that pressure. I think what they want to do is want to have the majority of their panel ready and be confident that they are fit to play. But if there's 1 or 2, 3 cases where guys are not entirely sure, then for the best interest of the player, they're going to say, look, we're going to set you aside and someone else will have to take your place.
Imagine Tyrone to be looking into how so many other players were able to get struck down by
Well,
this.
this Delta variant is, it spreads very quickly, and I'm not entirely sure, and I wouldn't want to speculate how they got it. Just feel sorry that they have. Now it's a question of getting over it and getting back fully fit for their own personal lives as well as their sporting lives.
Yeah, there's the other argument that's not an argument, but if you look at the teams that are in the All-Ireland semi-finals, they're the teams that can handle losing players. Like if other counties are in it, it would be disastrous, with a smaller
Yes.
pick,
Yeah.
And it sort of suggests, in order for a county team to be successful, you've got to have a big panel. You have to be able to handle these.
Well, you have to, and it's always been a difficult thing because I know from our experience and listening to other coaches and managers that you need a panel of around about 30 players, even just for training to have worthwhile matches. But even if you had a panel of 30 and 3 or 4 of them injured, all of a sudden you've got 10 against 10 in your games and training, and really they're quite limited what you can get out of those games. So, but from this particular instance where Tyrone have had so many out, you do need a 30-35 panel. But then the problem is your county board treasurers and people are telling you we can't afford to have that. I mean, I know from my own experience, one county chairman said to me quite a few years ago that he hoped the team lost the first or second round Ulster Championship because the county would save a lot of money rather than watch them go all the way to the final to get beaten and spend X amount of thousands, which I thought was a terrible thing to say. But that's the sort of thinking in some places. So, and it's difficult for a county board because to fund a team, to put them on that road, particularly nowadays with the amount of backroom teams there are and the size of those backroom teams and the amount of preparation that's involved, it's a lot of money. And once again, that comes back to what we were talking about earlier on, is why would somebody spend all that amount of money to play one match in the championship? How can you personally, justify it? If it was a business, they'd be out of business a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. Do you think then the situation's, I don't want to say worse, but how do you think it has developed since you were starting out, coaching county teams, to now? Is it got?
In terms of
the level of commitment and the size of players and the amount of training that has to happen?
Well, I know that when we came in, we decided to do something different. So we asked for a bigger time commitment, and we had the S&C program set up, but we put them divided up into centres. So there's 5 or 6 different centres. The Dublin Place players could stay in Dublin. They would meet at a gym down there, and they would train with McGeaney and McNulty's and those guys who were in Dublin. And then in Portadown we had Paul McGrain, and then the South Armagh guys, the McIntees, that meet up. And then we helped get some funding to fit out those particular places so that the relevant equipment was there for them to do that. So it didn't require them to travel so many miles to train in a particular gym in the county, because we wanted to take that burden off them. But we did ask for a bigger commitment. And certainly now, when you see, like I was involved in international rules a couple of years ago, and the body shape of the players is completely different. These guys are athletes now, and in order to get into that type of shape, they've committed their lives to it, but they have a very professional backup, the S&C, the sports science, the sports medicine, it's all top class. And when we were starting out, I'd have gone to rugby or soccer or athletics or something like that to try and get ideas or look for best practice. And I think now we're in a situation where people are coming into the GAA to look at best practice, which I think is phenomenal. And it's a great compliment to how we've evolved as a sport over the last 20 years. I think we should take great pride in it. But at the same time, as a number of people have said, that commitment has maybe got too big, and so there's too much time involved. These are still amateur players, so we have to try and find a happy compromise somewhere, in terms of giving them the free time, allowing them to study or go for professional exams or whatever it is they're doing in their ordinary lives, and still be able to give a good commitment to playing the sort of at a level at what's expected now.
Do you think it could get worse? Like, do you think
Well, it can't get any worse, because I think they've reached saturation point as it is. So I don't know what else they can do other than go full time, which is just out of the question. So I think they just have to look. What we try to do when we were involved was, whatever amount of time we had, let's get the best out of that time that we have, and then try our best to ensure that those guys got a break from the football. And that may mean taking a night out of training. Sometimes, because we didn't have the GPS and things, those guys were kind of just reading it, looking at the body language, listening to players, and decided, right, okay, I think we're going to take a down week next week and give them a week off. But now they've got the GPS, they've got greater monitoring, and they can make those decisions and maybe take 2 or 3 players out and say, you need to take a week out. You've got to look after their well-being, and you should never lose sight of that, because sometimes we're that driven in winning, and at winning at all costs, but you can't. These are amateur players. They are committed. They're giving their lives to you, so you're responsible for that. And I wouldn't want anybody, if I was involved, I wouldn't somebody come back to me in their 40s and saying, I need knee replacements, hip replacements. I've got long COVID because you forced me to play a championship match when my lungs and my system hadn't recovered. And then our county board's open then to litigation somewhere down the line, where some guy comes back and says, actually, I think you're culpable and I need damages now. So there's a whole host of things and areas, but really in the end of the day, when you're in the position of a coach looking after a team, number one, you want to win. You want to prepare a team as best you can, but at the same time, you have a responsibility for their well-being.
John, that's fascinating. Appreciate that. Thank you for
No
your
problem.
time.
Thank you, you're welcome.
So I'd like to welcome former Tyrone player Connor McAliskey to the show. Connor, thanks for coming on. Just to start, I want you to know what you thought of the decision by the GA to allow Tyrone an extra week to prepare for their All-Ireland semi-final against Kerry.
It's the correct decision. Tyrone outlined at the very beginning how big of an impact the COVID outbreak had on their squad, and they requested the 2 weeks. They've shown from the very outset of the situation that their top priority is the health of the players, and obviously when the GAA set the game this Saturday, it was obviously a massive decision for the squad, players, and management and the county board to release a statement saying that they weren't able to field, and that just shows how badly impacted the squad was. But given an extra week, everyone can get fit and healthy. They can get a bit of preparation done to represent Tyrone and Ulster in the All-Ireland semi-final, and I think that's what everyone wanted. Kerry obviously didn't want to walk over and made that clear to the GAA, and the GAA is now granted that extra week, so we look forward to next week.
Have you heard from any of the Tyrone team and how they're feeling about the situation, Connor?
Spoke to a few of the boys after the Ulster final, congratulating them and the hard work paying off and being Ulster champions again, but at that time there was the talk of the COVID outbreak within the squad, so the couple of conversations we had was regards to how they were individually and personally, and to make sure they were okay. Didn't ask too many questions, regarding the numbers within the squad and too much information about anyone else, to be honest, because, it was all being kept private, and, it wasn't my business to know, and, if I asked a question, the boys wouldn't have told them anyway, because it's all being kept in-house. But look, there's obviously that feeling of disappointment that they weren't going to be able to field for the semi-final of the All-Ireland. But, the main priority was everybody's health, all the players and the backroom staff, make sure everyone's healthy, just not just now, but in the future. So thankfully the GAA, took the decision to delay it by a week, and now we can see Tyrone and Kerry next week.
How much will this whole situation affect their ability to beat Kerry in the All-Ireland semi?
Look, you'd be naive to think that this wasn't going to impact Tyrone. They're going in to play Kerry, who, looking at the league result, and obviously Kerry were tipped by a lot of people to be All-Ireland champions before this whole situation even happened. So Tyrone's going in as underdogs. Obviously when you listen to Fergal and Brian and they discuss the whole situation within the Tyrone camp, you can see that there's been a lot of players tested positive or self-isolating, so they haven't been able to get on the pitch and prepare as a team. How badly has the players been impacted by COVID-19? Their fitness levels, will that come into account towards the end of a game? But the one thing that you can be sure of, that Tyrone will have learned from the league game. They'll have done a lot of video analysis on Kerry, and they'll be going in full confidence that they can beat Kerry. They won't have any fear of not being able to compete against Kerry. So it's just going to be interesting, if they can keep the game tight and it comes down to the last stretch, how big of a burn the last 2 weeks will have on them.
I'm wondering if the COVID situation has happened to the Tyrone team, how has it affected the club scene in Tyrone?
Yeah, there's definitely been teams affected by the whole situation. Thankfully, Clonaux hasn't been one of them, but I know that there's teams that had to postpone games, and there's games that had to be conceded because men have tested positive or self-isolating in squads, and they haven't had the numbers to fulfill the fixture. So it's a difficult one for them clubs, but I think there's a lot of knock-on effect now regarding the county situation. There's no star games left in Division 1 or 2, so we'll be at league games and a championship to play. Obviously Tyrone don't play the next weekend, and hopefully they're on the All-Ireland final, so that'll be mid-September before there's another league game. So there's going to be this long delay now, and then obviously when this comes around, there's going to be that tight schedule to get 8 league games and a championship played. So look, it's not easy managed, and hopefully the people up at Tyrone County Board are putting their heads together to come up with a plan to make it all work out.
Connor, you've retired from the Tyrone team, but I wonder how you feel about that decision now, a few months on.
That's a question I've been asked a lot over the last couple of weeks, but look, it was a decision I made for myself at the time, and I still stick by the decision that I made. I hadn't made the match day planning for the Donegal or Armagh game. I had a couple of conversations with Fergal regarding the situation. I was an unused sub against Monaghan, and the night before we played Monaghan, Clonaux started the league campaign against Dromore, and obviously a star game, being involved in the Monaghan game, I wasn't fit to play, and that ultimately was the deciding factor. 3 county games, but then a club game also, that I hadn't played any football when I was fit and healthy to play. So look, I'm captain at Clonaux, and I thought for me and what was best for me was to go back, enjoy football and get some minutes again. So I went back to play with Clonaux, and I don't regret that decision. And when I made the decision, I knew that I was stepping away, and that I'm not going to play for Tyrone again, and that's the decision that I knew I was making.
Finally, what did you think of the result at the weekend? Mayo's win over Dublin. How do you think that's going to affect the All-Ireland series?
Yeah, it was an unbelievable advertisement for football, and you just see social media was going mental, talking about so many big moments in the game, and everyone had a different man in the match for Mayo. There's so many leaders stepped up to drag them over the line, but look, I think all the neutrals wanted Mayo to win that one. It looked after 35 minutes that Dublin had stepped it up a gear that they hadn't shown previously in the championship, and they're really pushing on. But for Mayo to come back like that there, come back from the dead and win it was sensational. And their fitness levels were superior to Dublin's, which was something that I hadn't seen really before in extra time. But look, there's going to be a big massive game next week. Kerry are obviously big favourites to win it, but I don't think Tyrone's going to lie down. It's going to be a very close game, I believe. But look, I said to an uncle of mine that Mayo would beat Dublin, but whoever won the Tyrone and Kerry semi-final will win the All-Ireland, so I'm going to go with that.
Connor, thanks for your time. Okay, that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. See you again.